Good evening. Welcome to the City Council meeting of November 6, 2019. Can I have a roll call, please?
Peg Coniff. Here. Salem Derby. Present. Omar Gomez.
Here.
J.P. Kaczynski.
Here.
Bill Lynch.
Here.
Joe McCoy.
Here.
Tom Peake.
Here.
Dan Rist.
Here.
Owen Zaret.
Now, Lord, I mean here.
Will we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Flag is behind us. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of October 16th?
So moved.
Second. A motion second for the approval of this October 16th. All those in favor? Aye. Any abstentions?
Abstain.
One abstention. Any noes? Motion still passes. Public speak time. This is time for anyone from the public who would like to address the council for any topic other than what's on our public hearings. If anyone is here for the Councilor Zaret's resolution relating to the Medicare for All, this would be your time if you want to make a brief statement. This resolution will probably refer to subcommittee, and then there'll be more discussion at subcommittee and come back to City Council. So certainly this isn't your last opportunity, but if you want to take a minute or two just to introduce it or make your thoughts, this is your time. You can just come to the podium and just state your name and address, please.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. I'm Ian Roy. I live at 7 Elm Street in Southampton. I'm an activist with Western Massachusetts Medicare for All and the Easthampton Hub Medicare for All. And I would like to make a brief statement on behalf of this bill. I'm not going to use this microphone. It's too much.
You don't have to.
They can hear you.
We can hear you.
So, one brief aside, our representative, Dan Carey, sends his regrets. He intended to be here tonight, and he could not be here, but he is a co-sponsor of the bill and in full support of Medicare for All. Okay. So I want to speak and I want to speak on behalf of the resolution and urge you to support it. I would just like to review very quickly and briefly, because that's all the time I have, 4 key ideas or 4 key concepts of the Medicare for All bill. You probably have also heard of this as single payer. It is a single payer financial system. That's the major change. It's who pays the bills. But aside from the technicalities, as a social worker, I want to express the 4 major ideas behind this bill. Number 1, comprehensive health care benefits. That may be one of the most important things. Medicare for All would guarantee full coverage for every Massachusetts resident for all medically necessary care, including preventive, primary, dental, substance abuse, vision, mental health, rehabilitative, inpatient, home health services, and prescription drugs. And there are others. And I believe either it's in the bill now or being considered long-term care insurance. And any of you that have parents or grandparents who need long-term care, you know that it's devastates one's finances. So long-term care is also in the offing, if not already in the bill. Number 2, lower costs. There'd be no more premiums, deductibles, co-pays, bills for non-covered services, or other out-of-pocket costs. Instead, a fair and affordable tax, which would be cheaper for every Massachusetts resident, and at the same time provide secure and broader benefits for everyone. And there may be others who will speak to the tax structure, but I don't have time to do that at this point. Third idea, equity and fairness. Really very important. With Medicare for All and/or single payer, if you will, your own and your family's care would be guaranteed throughout their lifetime, regardless of employment, income, health, or marital status. That's a major one. And finally, last but not least, it's universal. With Medicare for All or single payer, your own and your family's care would be guaranteed throughout their lifetime. Did I say that? Regardless of employment, income, health, and marital status. Well, it's worth saying twice. So thank you, and we urge you to vote positively for Medicare for All. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Levinson. I am the co-convener of Western Mass Medicare for All, which is a grassroots organization advocating for single payer in the state of Massachusetts. The resolution being introduced tonight was initiated by the concerned citizens of our Easthampton hub. We are all aware of the increasing problem of healthcare access and cost in the Commonwealth. Despite gains made under Romneycare and the ACA, nearly 200,000 people in our state are uninsured, and many more, even with insurance, are unable to get health care because of the high deductibles, co-pays, and other out-of-pocket costs. At the municipal level, budgets are strained under the rising cost of premiums for city and school district employees. According to fiscal year 2019 information that we received from the city, Easthampton spent about $4.6 million, or 23% of payroll, on health benefits for current and retired employees. Under the proposed Medicare for All legislation in Massachusetts, all health benefits would be paid through a public health care trust, not by the employers. Health care would no longer be part of the collective bargaining process, and the city would no longer bear the burden of administering those benefits. Instead, the city would pay a tax of 7.94% of payroll as their contribution to the trust. For Easthampton, in FY 2019, that would have meant a savings of nearly $3 million. In addition, the city would also save the lion's share of its OPEB liability. That is, other post-employment benefits, which are mainly health insurance. The burden of accounting for that large future liability and the pressure to invest money now in a dedicated OPEB trust would be lifted. And finally, the city would be relieved of the social costs of health stress among its uninsured and underinsured residents. Medicare for All in Massachusetts would not only guarantee secure, quality, lifetime coverage to every resident of this city, regardless of their employment or other status, it would also save the city a significant amount of money and stabilize that volatile part of the budget. Similar resolutions have already passed in Northampton, South Hadley, and Holyoke, as well as Boston and Cambridge and a half a dozen towns in Franklin County. Many more will follow. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration of the resolution, which we believe to be clearly in the best interest of Easthampton's health and financial well-being. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrea Stone. I live at 4 Crescent Street in Easthampton. I'm a physician, and I've worked in public mental health in Massachusetts for 30 years. So I come at this from a little bit different point of view. When I started in the early 90s, I was at a community mental health clinic. Many people did not have insurance. We saw them anyway. I think our bottom fee was $5, but I suspect some people got in for less. And I could meet with people and hear their story, but when it came to doing something beyond that, like getting laboratory work or prescribing medications or getting people into therapy, that was not an option. Years later, I'd never heard it called Romneycare, but we expanded availability of Mass Health to people, which was wonderful. People were now able to get the full array of services that we could provide. And then something else happened, which is it began to be clear that people with private insurance, it was actually harder for me often to get them services. The private insurance companies put extreme restrictions on the number of visits, on the number of medications they would approve. They also required a lot of time filling out paperwork, convincing people that I knew what I was doing after all my years of training. So that put another spin for me on the idea of what the value is of having private insurance in terms of being able to give people good care. So I certainly support universal public care.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Elaine Buckley, and I'm a resident of Southampton, but I'm a member of the Easthampton Medicare for All Hub group. I'm here to speak, obviously, in favor of Medicare for All, because I believe health care is a human right. I also realize that healthcare companies and pharmaceutical companies exist solely to make profits. That is their primary motivation. I think it should be to make sick people well and to lessen human suffering. But if that were the case, then all people would get the health care that they need. While the healthcare companies are making record profits, $6 billion the last quarter, up 29% from the same quarter last year, some people can't afford their co-pays and their prescriptions. 1 out of 5 people between the ages of 19 and 64 can't afford to fill their prescriptions. A former colleague of mine, who happens to be an Easthampton resident, after being diagnosed with cancer, went bankrupt. She had a good job and health insurance, but her co-pays for her prescriptions were over $1,000 a month. Sometimes insurance companies deny life-saving prescriptions because of the cost. In a recent article of Jim Hightower, he spoke of a nurse that admonished her patient, telling him that he had to take his medications every day, because every day he didn't take it, his cancer would grow. But then she had to send the patient home without his prescription because the insurance wouldn't cover it. Our present Medicare works for seniors better. I know a man who takes his grandson to swimming classes where I take my granddaughter. He has stage 4 prostate cancer. He has Medicare, which pays $25,000 a month for his medication and an additional $13,000 quarterly for a calcium shot. His copay is $60. So currently, some people get the medication and the treatment they need, and some don't. But all people should get what they need to stay healthy. I say, let insurance companies make money on other forms of insurance, and not on people's lives. I urge you to pass the resolution in support of Medicare for All, and to put people first. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Christopher Martin, citizen of Easthampton, live over on 11 Berkeley Street. We've already heard from people tonight talking about the bill and the policy, and they're all much more well-versed on this than I am, so I will just speak from the heart and speak from my personal experiences, which, ironically, despite the results of it, I find myself incredibly fortunate, both physically and financially, to have survived what I went through. So, needless to say, as a young person who went through college, I'm very well versed in debt and how it shapes your life. And that's what determines what I did with my life. I became a tech writer, and I started saving a lot of money, working to bringing down my loans, and just trying to be financially stable. And I was very proud of that. Then, 3 years ago, I was just riding my bicycle, actually, just with an eye shot of this window, through the parking lot of the Button Building, and I freak accident, flipped over my handlebars and broke my neck and received a very, very bad concussion and palmessa road rash in my face, across my body, just very bad. And fortunately, I had just started a new job after getting laid off from my last one a week prior to the accident. And again, fortunately, my new job would permit me to get on their health insurance before the month-long grace period where they don't necessarily have to provide coverage or not. So I was insured, and I had saved up a decent amount of money in my life, but despite all that, it left me with basically nothing, because despite the fact that I had health insurance, I still had thousands of dollars in a deductible that I needed to pay before the health insurance would kick in. So I was still left with almost nothing. And so despite all this, I was jumping through all the hoops that we see as necessary to determine that we need care in this country. And it still just doesn't work. And I just imagine if I had gotten that accident a week prior, just how I would have an exponential amount of debt on top of my current student debt. And so that's what got me to begin working with Western Mass Medicare for All. And through canvassing Western Mass Medicare for All, I've heard countless stories from people who are far less fortunate than I have been in regards to their dealings with health care. And this could be people that are insured or are not insured. And just because people push like, oh, we're going to provide coverage for all people, coverage doesn't necessarily mean anything if that is an unsustainable amount of money it takes to cover people. So yes, that's the long and short of what I wanted to say tonight. And healthcare is a human right, and it is absolutely necessary if we want to sustain a functional economy and community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I can take one more speaker, and then we have public hearings, but I will open up public speak time after the public hearings close in case someone really wants to speak. Again, remind this is just being referred to subcommittee tonight. This is not going to be voted on tonight, but if you would like to make a short statement, have it.
Short, Joe? Good evening. Nancy Stenberg, 17D Main Avenue, Easthampton. I'll just read part of what the testimony I gave on Beacon Hill earlier this year. So I've unfortunately had some employment issues over the last few years, and when I'm not under the coverage of private insurance, I have to go on Mass Health, which, you know, I am very glad that we have, but when I do have to do that, as a person who requires some medications and medical supplies, here's some examples of what happened. I have to switch from my name brand inhaler to a generic inhaler, and Mass Health only, you know, will cover certain inhalers, so that becomes a problem. And then, you know, my primary care physician will suggest certain generic inhalers, and Mass Health will say, no, not that one, et cetera, et cetera. I have to switch CPAP suppliers, but Mass Health only says 3 CPAP suppliers in the state are acceptable, so, you know, that's a pain. I can't go to my preferred dentist because that one doesn't take Mass Health. I can't go to my preferred dermatologist because that one doesn't take Mass Health. Notwithstanding the fact that doing all this stuff becomes a full-time job when I really should be looking for a job because I'm always on the phone, you know, paperwork, etc. So none of this would happen if we had Medicare for All. And increasingly in our what we call gig economy, you know, lots of people fall into this sort of work pattern because people don't like go to the factory and work there for 40 years and then retire. So again, Medicare for All would be sure that we didn't have to do these things. So you know, let's remember that Easthampton voted a non-binding referendum, about 70% or so. And so we're here to really encourage you to support our are we calling this referendum too?
Resolution.
Resolution, right. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Actually, before we open public hearings, Councilor Zare, do you want to just make a motion? We can move it to committee right away then, since the discussion was just coming up. Do you have
if everyone else is, yeah. So I'd like to make a motion to move the resolution in support of Medicare for All to the Rules and Government Relations Subcommittee.
Second. Okay, a motion and a second move to Rules and Regulations. The request from Councilor Zare for a resolution relating to Medicare for All. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
Motion. One abstention.
Yeah, and I just want to make it clear, I'm not abstaining because I don't support it. I absolutely do support it. I work for a health insurer, I'm sorry, and due to conflict of interest, I have to abstain from these things, but if I retire in the next 3 weeks, I'll be able to vote for it. So, fingers crossed. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Maybe.
So anyway, I'll entertain a motion to open public hearings.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion passes. Public hearings are open. Councilor Rist.
Thank you. We're here for the new 2020 tax classification, which we do every year. The tax, and I'm going to ask our assessor and Peter Davies, who's a member of our Board of Assessors, to correct me if I make statements that might not be as accurate as they should be. This tax classification is based on evaluation of our community's property. You sitting down, the amount of property valued in the city is $1,686,077,195. So, and that represents an $86 million increase in value this year. I'm going to ask them to tell me what percentage of increase that might be for the total value. We've just done a reval, and I wanted to ask if one of you could come up how that enters into this tax classification, if it does. And secondly, a couple of things they've made statements on which are important to know. This tax classification deals with the fact that we do not, in our community, and we have never, had separate tax for businesses and commercial property versus individual property. If we were to do that, there's a couple of statements they've made that's important. If we were to shift the tax rate and have two different tax classifications, then we would have a 7% reduction in residential property taxes, but a 50% increase in business classes, and that's not very business friendly, which is why we have not done that. And another statement they've made, which is important to hear, shifting the tax burden does not increase revenue. It merely shifts the burden to other taxpayers. That's important to know. So in other words, if we decided to have a separate rate for businesses, that wouldn't necessarily bring the city more revenue. It would bring the city more revenue. So I'm going to ask if, and the assessors recommend the same thing, a single tax rate for all classes of property, no open space discount, no residential exemption, and no small commercial exemption. This is the same as we've done every year. Lori, could you come up and just answer a couple of questions quickly, in case there's others too? When we had the reval this year, that entered into this in the sense that we've had the valuation we've put forward?
No, the reval is more likely the DLR approves of the methodology that we use to come up with the values.
Oh, okay.
So that basically it's that. They don't set the values or whatever. We just have to use the certain rules to follow to come up with the values.
If the value of property in our community has gone up, we're only allowed to raise property taxes 2.5%. So that would mean that it's balanced by what the rate will be, which you'll set in the future, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted people out there to hear that. So we're not setting the tax rate now, and when does that get set?
In the near future.
Are you ready for DOR stuff?
Yeah, in the next couple of weeks we should probably have it.
Okay. So there is going to be an increase in the value of everybody's property because in looking at all the properties in the community, obviously everybody knows real estate's gone up in our community.
Yeah, we base it on sales from the prior calendar year, and we compare them to the assessed price. In the reval year, we break it down finer by like style of home and neighborhood and things like that, depreciation.
So everybody knows the value. I forgot what I was going to ask. Never mind.
Okay.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Does anybody have any questions?
Hey, questions for the principal assessor while she's here? I see that look on JP's face. I don't know.
Oh, there's always lots of questions, but not for this discussion at the moment.
I actually don't know how to even frame the question because I'm not.
Okay.
The paragraph in here that talks about the residential exemption being 35 would allow up to 35%. Yep. I think last year, if I read, it was 20%.
Yeah, they changed that.
So, what does that mean? Well, so that rate,
you would vote on a rate,
okay.
and you would take off. We'll go with the 35% of an assessed value.
Yep.
And it would only have to be for residents, owner-occupied parcels. So we would, in essence, lower their assessed value by that percentage, and they would be taxed on that. But in doing so, you still have to levy the same amount within that class, so your tax rate would be higher.
Other people would go higher.
Yeah. So
what would be the threat? Who would get this exemption?
Owner-occupied.
Would everyone? So everyone in that class would get it?
Yes.
Or can you pick and choose who gets it?
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's the entire class that
No,
we get?
yeah, resident of owner
Okay, I'm just-
occupied. Yeah, owner occupied.
I mean, it's not, okay.
Yeah.
So the taxes on rental properties would go up.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is geared more towards communities that would have rental properties or seasonal properties, because those properties wouldn't qualify. So you would be taking less off the value
Okay.
to add to the tax rate. But in this case, it would probably wash.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Do you want to Peter up or anything, or you all set?
Okay. Anyone from the public who would like to address the council on this topic, this would be your opportunity. Okay, Councilor Rist.
I move that the City of Easthampton set a factor of 1 for the fiscal year 2020 tax rate, keeping a single tax rate for all classes of property, and to not grant an open space discount, nor a residential exemption, nor a small commercial exemption, as recommended by the Board of Assessors.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the previously read 2020 tax classification. Additional questions or comments?
I just want to say it certainly does make sense to have a single tax rate for all classes at this time, until you reach about at least 25% of the community having the business class tax. You really need that number. Framing, it's good in places like Framingham and other communities that have a huge business segment to their the businesses aren't going anywhere. They're staying in Framingham.
Yeah.
Here, we really need to have that advantage available when you talk about being business friendly. So the single rate makes most sense, and that's why we do it all the time.
Okay, any additional comments? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion passes. I believe it's still Councilor Rist.
The second item up for public hearing is a $12,000 request from the Director of Personnel to move money from clerical to building inspector services. I'd like Jane to come up and talk about this. I thought I saw her. Oh, there she is. Because I have left my notes at home, but as I recall, we've had a major, and maybe the mayor can step in, change in the administration of our building inspection services. We now have a commissioner of building inspection, and we have 2 building inspectors. One is part-time and one is per job or per diem, however we want to talk about it. And we've added a clerk down there, which is someone who is, am I correct, was part-time in your office and is now more down there as well. We've added hours to her, so she works both places?
No.
No, okay. Could you explain this, because I left my notes at home, I apologize.
The transfer is to transfer the part-time clerical line item that was in the Personnel Department budget down to the Building Inspection Department. The reason for this is when the mayor and I, with the recent resignation of the building commissioner, the mayor and I looked at reorganizing the department. What does it need? What's going to best serve the city, the residents, the contractors? And one of the things we felt was very important was to put additional clerical time down in that office. The clerical support that was down there was for 12 hours a week. By moving the part-time clerical person that was in my office down, we were able to expand that to 24 hours a week, which is covering obviously double the time, but it's also giving the contractors more contact, or people that call in have someone answering the phone, not just a voicemail system. So it's worked out to that. As for reorganizing the rest, currently we have a part-time building commissioner and 2, as you mentioned, 2 inspectors, one that is part-time and the other is on call and is paid by the inspection. So the commissioner that's there now has the hope of a 24-hour turnaround, which is what she's working towards, but it's a busy season and there was a lot to catch up on, so she is working on that. So this transfer is to supplement what they have down there and to better serve the needs of the department.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Questions?
Any questions for Personnel Director? No? Okay, thank you very much. Anyone from the public would like to address the council on this appropriation? This would be your opportunity. Okay, Councilor Riss, onto your motion.
Request is hereby made for the council to approve the following appropriation. The amount requested is $12,000. To be transferred from personnel, permanent clerical, $12,000. To be transferred to building inspection services, permanent clerical, $12,000. For the following purpose, to fund additional clerical costs to provide additional office coverage in the building inspection office.
Second.
Okay, the motion is second with interdepartmental transfer of $12,000 from personnel, permanent clerical to building inspection services. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Mr. President, I move the public hearings be closed.
Second. Motion is second to close public hearings. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. So if anyone, I did say I would open public hearings again, public speak time. If there is somebody who feels an urgent need to speak to the Medicare for All, this would be your opportunity. I know it was already moved to subcommittee. I don't see anyone standing up. Okay, so let's move on then. So communications, just a couple. We do, which is a yearly report from the superintendent of schools in relation to the 2019 municipal school budget, where costs may have been overrun. This is a document that the city clerk has available, so if you're interested in seeing the 2019 school budget, municipal expenditures related to that budget, you can contact the city clerk for that information. Also, I do want to remind people, the Veterans Council is holding their annual Veterans Day Memorial on November 11th. Festivities start at 10 a.m. at the American Legion, so certainly everyone is invited to participate in those activities and parade on that solemn holiday as well. Mayor Communications, Mayor LaChapelle.
Good evening. President McCoy, just to go back a little bit on the report that was submitted around municipal school support, our auditor, Val Bernier, actually produces that report and then gives it to the superintendent. I would just like her, with your okay, to come up and give a quick overview of the work she's done, and just how this fits into the upcoming budget season.
That would be great. Thank you.
Great.
I believe that the mayor is addressing the memo on September 19th, which is the actual 2019 school spending done by the city, in addition to the school budgets. In that memo, I have increases above what was estimated for the 19 budget, $151,199.99 in healthcare costs. Workers' comp was $9,000 higher than estimated. Medicare was $3,000 higher than estimated. And there's a list, so it's right on the memo. Basically, in 2019, the city paid about $8.1 million in costs in support of the school, over and above the school budget. And these include things like health insurances, let's see. There are chargebacks for the auditor, the treasurer's time for processing warrants, collecting deposits, chargebacks for the software, 50% of the software. The school has their own software version of KVS that the city has also. So personnel chargebacks for administration of insurance, payroll processing, because the payroll is processed by the city now. So the city is paying all these costs for the school, basically. And we get credit on many of them for the net school spending, which is required of the city. And
On the net school spending, the city has a total of, let's see, $5.9 million in municipal spending for net school spending. And then there are things that we don't get credit for net school spending on. They go on the end of the year report, but the health insurance for the retirees is not included in net school spending, and yet, let's see. The retiree insurance in 19 was $716,734. We don't get credit for that. We don't get credit on the net school spending for all of the debt that we pay for the school. And in 2020, that's going to be over $5 million. Actually, in 2020, the estimate for the city spending for the school over and above the budget is $12.8 million. Just so you have an idea of how the city is also supporting the school other than just the budget. Let's see. The Parks Department also has a chargeback for the field use and everything, but they don't charge for all the costs that they have, and they may be looking at redoing their agreement because they're finding that they have a lot of costs that the school is placing on them that are coming out of their budget, and it's getting to the point where it's getting to be a problem for them. So these are monies that, you know, the city is paying for the school. We don't get reimbursed. The only thing that we get for it is that we get credit on the end of the year school report and credit towards our Chapter 70 net school spending. I don't know if you have any questions on the memo?
Is that Councilor Briss first, Councilor Briss?
Just so the public knows, net school spending, correct me if I'm wrong, is a determination of what is over and above, in this case, the minimum we should spend per student, given our population. Is net school spending a gauge of that? Am I correct in that? In other words, there's a certain minimum the state sets for spending per student, and when we have credit toward net school spending, it's demonstrating that we are spending that much more per student. Am I correct on that?
In 2019, the required net school spending was $20,110,053, and our actual school spending was $22,174,690.69. So a couple million over and above what was required.
Okay. That's what I thought. I just wanted people to know that. Thank you.
Good question.
So, just so I understand, so the purpose of you going through this is to let us know the amount of funding that comes out of the rest of the city's budget that goes toward the schools that was not identified in the school budget when the budget was put together, nor has it ever been. We always have these overages or whatever, and the city has always covered it, if you will. And so I guess what I'd be interested in seeing is the trend from a couple years ago to now. Are we pulling money out of the city's budget at a greater rate than we ever have, or are these numbers, which are a little heart-stopping to me, or are these numbers typical for what we see year over year for what we have to pull out of the city's budget?
It seems to be increasing every year, but I mean, that would be normal because salaries are going up, costs are going up, so the cost of school support is going up, and it's going to get even greater when we take on this new debt in 2020, the $5 million over and above what we were doing before.
Do you have are the numbers available that we could see kind of the trending, you know, line by line? I know you've got like indirect municipal appropriation, net student spending and things like that. Do you have it like over the last 3 to 5 years that we could see it moving and then at a percentage rate?
I don't, but generally if you look at each year's actual, it compares it to the prior year and it shows the increase over the prior year and all the percentages.
Does it talk about line items like workers' comp, health insurance, all that stuff?
Usually I cover any
large changes in the cover letter, you know,
And
the
you have-
large increases.
And that would
or
be in the
decreases.
budget? I mean, there would be cover letters for each
When I
year?
send out the actual net school
For each
spending in
year?
September.
Okay.
The real purpose of this is to give the school the numbers, because they use these numbers on their end-of-the-year school support.
Build the next budget? No?
They have to report on their end-of-year school report
Okay.
the city's spending in support of the school.
Okay.
In both net school spending category and non-net.
Okay.
So that's what this is for. It gets done at budget time with an estimated amount, and then at the end of the year or after the close of the year with the actual, and then the copy goes, you know, to the council.
And are these stored somewhere at an annual basis, your cover letter?
I have them all, yes, and I could do a comparison if you
could,
like.
that would
I
be
don't know
great.
how many years.
Wouldn't have to go. I'm just interested kind of in a trend of the last 3 to 5, maybe. If you could, that would be great. Thanks.
Sure.
Councilor Kwasinski, did you have a question?
I was going to ask about the same line of thinking about the trends, and I remember that there were decisions that this council had made to exclude certain expenses from net school spending, and those should be noted in that trend report that you'll develop
It
for
was-
us.
Yes,
Yeah.
the retiree health insurance.
Because the retiree health insurance had been included as part of the city's contribution, and then we all made a decision to say no, that the retirees' insurance should be excluded, and we still should meet the minimum required spending, and we in fact did and do and add more. So,
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Rist?
Just a quick comment. When you say we're going up to 12 million, 5 million of that is new debt, just so people out there don't get scared, that new debt is for the new school, and we all have a tax increase coming to pay for that. So it's balanced by new revenue. It's not an increase that is unexpected or a surprise. In other words, we knew we were going to pay that debt, and the people voted to pay it through their taxes. So that's a balance. What is interesting is what the other increases are beyond that. That's why I'm happy you're doing this overview. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Councilor Lynch?
Sorry. Thank you. The required amount, the $20 million that we were required to spend, what happens if the city doesn't spend that much? What are there penalties? Are there fines that the state won't give us funds next year? And, you know, just curious for that.
Yeah, they require, that's net school spending.
Correct.
They require that we spend that amount, and if we don't, yes, then we have a problem. And I seem to remember that a few years ago, Palmer had that problem, and I don't know what they did to resolve it, but yeah, it definitely is a problem.
Does the school understand or know what that is, the city know ahead of time, what that dollar amount is, so that we're cognizant of what we're spending throughout the course of the year? And
It's posted on the DOE website every year.
okay. Thanks. That's it.
Additional questions? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for giving Val the time, and I also just want to clarify a couple of things. So the report that was shared is CC'd to you every year, to the City Council every year, is on file. This is not something new or different, and it's a required part of the process, both for the city and also the school department. This will be the first of a couple of other documents that you usually get just as a CC, but I will bring forward that just really takes a deeper dive into the nuances of our budget process. And that also said, I think this one purposely I brought forward first because, as we all know, we're in quite a thick, intense debate on the state level for funding for our schools. And a lot of what we're looking at in these memos, other communities deal with it. They have to go through the same process. And the funding formula, as we're looking at it right now, there are really big gaps that do not help cities like Easthampton with what we're looking at. And, you know, as far as retired school employees, I don't agree or disagree of what's excluded or excluded. The bottom line is it's $700,000 with cost. Happy to pay it. Believe healthcare is a right, but the numbers are the numbers are the numbers. So budget presentations are complicated. It's a big, thick book. It's a lot for everyone to prepare and a lot of information that comes out at the council at once. So I'm trying to kind of pick out what were questions last year and get that information before you. And I thank our auditor, who is so supremely competent, and with all of the turnover in finance has just stepped up over and over again and hit deadlines, and for her to put the comparative report, I'm very grateful. Thank you, Val. That said, I just have a couple of more kind of updates. One, just a general statement around Election Day. The fact that our city clerk actually bumped up what she thought would be the final percent coming out is a very unusual occurrence, and certainly was yesterday when you look across the state of the municipalities who had elections. I think Barb's final number is 35% of a turnout. I think that's, I'm so proud that I'm a part of a city that did that. And also just the strong civil discourse that happened around ballot questions, but also contested races, and those who did not face a challenger, including myself, also really had to step up and talk to the issues and clarify where we stood as folks non-opposed. And I want to just thank everybody who ran or led a ballot committee. Congratulations, and thank you for stepping up. And also I look forward to working with all the new electeds and working on our ballot questions. I also would just like to, probably one of my favorite quotes to the press of all time, around an election, I tip of a hat to Councilor Tom Peake, who was quoted in several news outlets that last night was the fourth best event in his life. So, and that was mentioned.
I wonder what the top three are.
I to each his own. But that rolling into today, I was on Beacon Hill testifying before a committee, the Elections Joint Committee on Elections. Our state representative Dan Carey serves on that committee, and testified with Mayor Joseph Curtatone from Somerville around the local option bill that is before the House and Senate, around cities and towns being able to locally opt in and not go through the procedures that we did with the state legislature, and also talked in support generally about the statewide ranked choice voting, more following the suit of what Secretary of State Galvin is talking about, as well as a couple of other ballot committees. Also an update on our the Mass DOT meeting we had about South and Main. Councilor Riss, thank you very much for attending with me. We are awaiting, we have a provisional report and are waiting the last piece of data that DOT is collecting. And once I get that, I will get it to you all in your packet. The provisional recommendation from the group that we met with, which included District 2, the regional director, Rich Massey, is that we go forward and talk to PVPC about doing a traffic study that is all 4 streets, all 4 sides, because one is state and the other 3 we own. And it seems that the traffic study, even the one in 2017, didn't take that full account. And we also had questions around the increased traffic count at that intersection with the school. Are trips counted differently if they are school buses? And then getting information from the school district of how many more, do we know how many buses will be going up and down South Street because of the new school and all students, those thousand students being at one location? So we've made some progress. They were not overly positive of our ask. I think at the end we got maybe a new painted crosswalk out of them with the hope that this last piece of data, we definitely meet some of the criteria, but the last piece of data that they're collecting will summarize it. And we got them, the police department got them all the accident reports and the details of it. So I'll get that with the last piece of data, so you're looking at everything. I'm hoping next week, and certainly by the next council meeting. So that, and then two more. I mentioned a couple of conferences and whatnot that I attended last year, and I made a commitment to the National League of Cities and the Kauffman Foundation to do I forgot what it's called. Bear with me. There we go. To do a city innovation ecosystem commitment workshop. So I made a commitment to have a dynamic resource map of folks who want to start, grow, or change businesses, whether that is making cupcakes or practicing law in their office or expanding their machine shop in an innovative way, and how we can be more supportive, but also it's a one-click exercise. So whether you are in Southampton or Massachusetts or Southampton, New York, you will be able to go to a tool called the dashboard that will give all of the pertinent social, economic information, what our salaries are, but also how folks who've started or grown a business or even left here with a business, why, and what the real culture for innovation looks like. That dashboard is provisionally up. I will send the link. I forgot to do it again, and you'll see that the data is starting to populate. The key of this project is from a YouTube video that a doctor who studies, PhD, who studies just municipal support of small business, is that if a city knew what it should know, then the planning and support of business and innovation would go through the roof. And even with the dashboard, when you get on it, you'll see some pretty interesting figures that took me aback, especially around diversity in our community, thinking it always was in the mid-90s and it's now at an 88%. And what the breakdown is of those who are non-white was very interesting, and salary, differentials, and level of education and how it relates to salary. So that's starting to be populated because of the work that my office has already done on this. I've been invited to the National League of Cities CIT Ecosystem Commitment Conference in San Antonio in November 20th, 21st, and 23 to work with other experts and also mayors. A big push of this is how we can get free data that can be distilled to help us make strategic decisions around grants, and also employees and subcommittees. And that then the 2 days before, I'm going to New Jersey to talk to the municipal association down there about, from a mayor's perspective, of cannabis on a retail but also medical basis, and just how it was once the legislative process was finished, what it actually took out of a city hall. And that's 2 days before. That's the 18th and 19th. It was in the paper, we received a federal subpoena similar to other cities, Uxbridge, Leicester, Northampton, I'm forgetting another one, around cannabis, retail, and medical. The scope of that subpoena is for documents. We have requested some time to do that. Ashley, Barbara, my office, we're kind of circling the wagons to put together a search parameter and working with our city attorney to make sure that we capture all the information that is asked for. And it's really any communications, voicemails, videos, meeting minutes, plans, host community agreements that relate to anybody, any cannabis entity that ventured into the city to maybe do something. So we'll be putting that together. We're fully cooperating. I think it's just a matter of having the time to get it all done, but we'll get it done. And I'm talking to the U.S. Attorney's Office around that.
Thank you.
That's all.
Councilor Riss, did you have a question? I think Councilor Riss.
I just want to make a comment on the South of Main Street meeting that I was lucky enough to attend with the mayor. Councilors, it is obvious to me, Councilor Derby will probably confirm this. They are data-driven. They are analytical, and even though the obvious accidents that happen there And it does go over their data, that it's above the data they need to suggest a traffic light, because there was a lot of accidents. I think they said 1.2 accidents per million or something like that of traffic. I am not optimistic. I believe that we will need to do some political pressure, because it's all about the data, and to me, it's about human life, and I don't know. And the guy in charge, correct me if I'm wrong, but he doesn't like traffic lights, and he was negative from the beginning on that, although he did feel that the data regarding how many more cars would be going down to South Street because of the school was wrong. I just don't understand that, and I left the meeting pessimistic, so I think we're going to have to do something over and above just following the data, and that means going to the State House and trying to get some of our representatives to help us. And I don't think we should give up on it, because I think it is a dangerous intersection, and we see it differently than they do. That's what I guess I want to say to you.
I would just comment, the District 2 Director, Rich Massey, actually was data-driven and was still collecting and is seeing an uptick in accidents. It was the Mass DOT traffic designer who doesn't like, I should say, doesn't prefer signals, and I didn't put any buzz in his ear. He likes roundabouts. But he also said, even a roundabout there, the taking of land and the relocation of utilities, it's $2 million, $2.5 million, and the signals aren't much cheaper, but he also, the designer as well as the district manager, were very clear that there's some more data, that the accidents are trending towards needing a light, and it'll be about volume, and we all had some questions about the data, and why aren't we projecting in school travel and school buses? So
we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're on to standing committees. Finance, Councilor Rist.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee will meet the 13th, next Wednesday at 5 p.m. to deal with the items that I'm about to read, which I would like to send to committee. These are for new business. These are supplemental appropriations and first reading for all of these, after which I will send them to committee. The first is a supplemental appropriation. The amount is $200,000 to be transferred from free cash, $200,000 to be transferred to general stabilization, $200,000 for the purpose of supplementing the city's general stabilization fund. The second is a supplemental appropriation. The amount is $368,252 to be transferred from free cash, $368,252 to be transferred to capital stabilization fund, $368,252 for the purpose of supplementing the city's capital stabilization fund. The next are CPA appropriations. Supplemental appropriation request for $2,980.87 to be appropriated from the CPA Reserve Fund, $2,980.87 to be appropriated to the Mount Tom North Trailhead Park, $2,980.87 for the following purpose: for unanticipated closing costs with the 12-acre land acquisition project. The next supplemental appropriation is also a CPA appropriation. The amount requested is $15,000 to be appropriated from CPA Reserve for Community Housing, $15,000 to be appropriated to the Housing Production Plan Update, $15,000 for the following purpose: for an update of the city's housing production plan. The request is hereby made for the following appropriation. The amount requested is $20,000 to be appropriated from CPA Reserve Fund, $20,000 to be appropriated to the Mount Tom North Trailhead Trail Design, $20,000 for the following purpose: for preliminary design work, community meeting, schematic design, and cost estimates for the creation of a trailhead, accessible trail, and parking area. And lastly, no, I'm sorry, let me make a comment. Amount requested for the approval of the following appropriation: $80,000 to be appropriated from the CPA undesignated fund, $80,000 to be appropriated to the Nonotuck Park Pickleball Courts Construction Project, $80,000. The amounts requested be used for the following purpose: for the construction of 2 new pickleball courts, including fencing, court markings, and fixtures, I move that all of the aforementioned appropriations be sent to Finance Committee for review.
Second to all 6.
A motion and a second to move all the previous resolution appropriations to finance. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
I also move that those aforementioned appropriations be set for public hearing at the next meeting at 6:15 in these chambers.
Second.
A motion and a second to set public hearings for those mentioned supplemental appropriations, which I believe is November 20th. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
That concludes, Mr. President.
Okay, that concludes Public Safety, Councilor Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. President. We didn't meet yet because we were supposed to have a meeting yesterday, but that was election day. So our next meeting is going to be November 12th at 6 p.m., room number 1. I just want to add to our agenda, I received several calls and emails about speeding in our city, and I want to move that, I want to make a motion to move, to review the speeding in the street of Easthampton.
Second.
Okay. A motion and a second to move to public safety request from Councilor Gomez to look at speeding concerns in the city. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
That's concluded, Mr. President.
Okay, appointments, Councilor Coniff.
Amended agenda. Okay. I have 3 appointments I'd like to move. The first 2 are around City Council President appointments. The first one, both are for the CPA Committee. The first one is Greg Rowland, CPA Committee with an expiration date of 12/31/2020, and Jessica Allen, CPA Committee with an expiration of 12/31/2021. Both of those I would like to move to the Appointment Subcommittee.
Second.
A motion second to move to appointments, the CPA presidential appointments. Additional questions or comments? Councilor Rist.
I just wanted to make a comment on Jessica Allen's appointment in all transparency. As a chairman of the CPA, we had a member who failed to attend most of our meetings and had decided that he was not able to make the commitment. I had been speaking with Jessica about a number of matters and how she could serve the city months ago, and I asked her at the time if she would ever consider serving on the CPA, and she was excited to do so. And when this appointment came up, I have to admit that I recruited her immediately, and she's very excited to attend. She can't attend the first meeting on the 21st because she had a previous engagement, but promises to make every meeting. And I believe this is a lottery win for the city of Easthampton. It is huge to have someone of her caliber and her knowledge of the city and of the CPA to be on the committee. I'm very excited, so I just wanted you all to know how this happened. Thank you. And we have a motion.
Councilor Lynch?
On Greg Rowland, is there any information on the individual or candidate information?
It's a good point. I don't think there was anything in our packet about
Yeah,
it.
No, he's a reappointment.
Okay.
But we should.
And we still should have
Something.
I will be happy to send you all a letter indicating that he has served on the committee excellent. He's a Deerfield CFO, and his knowledge of money and his work on the CPA has been excellent. But he sent a letter of request to the president for reappointment, and I understand that the chairman of the Appointments Committee would just like something from the chairman of the committee, and I'll be happy to send that to all of you about him. If you'd like more information about his resume, I can give you that, but he's a reappointment.
Yeah, it's fine. I just would like information.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I mean, especially, you know, we're going to get a couple of new members on the council here. I don't think we should assume that people understand the history of these individuals when they're up for reappointment.
Okay.
The last...
I mean, I don't think you can vote on that. So there was a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
And the last one I have is a mayoral appointment for someone by the name of Patrick Bruff for a Council on Aging with a term expiration of 12/31/2021. By motion, move that to Appointment Subcommittee.
Second.
A motion second to move to Appointment Subcommittee, Patrick Bruff, Council on Aging. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
We'll set our next meeting for the 20th of November at 5:30 downstairs. That concludes.
Ordinance, Councilor Derby.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ordinance Subcommittee met on the 29th of October, and we looked at our agenda and found that we had a couple things that we could clean up and parse down. Cannabis equity amendments is kind of stuck in a holding pattern. So I would like to, in the form of a motion, request that it be removed from our agenda without prejudice.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to remove without prejudice the cannabis equity amendments. Additional questions or comments on that motion? Councilor Rist?
Does this mean that the equity ordinance that we were trying to get through is dead?
No.
No, without prejudice.
So basically, until some precedent is set in other municipalities around this, and we have solicitor time freed up for this particular issue, we're in a holding pattern. So rather than just keep it on the agenda where it's going to kind of sit for potentially an extended period of time, I'm asking for it to be released without prejudice so we can bring it back when the timing is right.
Okay.
Questions or comments on that? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? One abstention. Motion passes.
And the second piece is the request that I put forward to review on and off street parking limitations. This is still an interesting thing for I think the city to look at. I think at this time it's a little bit complicated, and we have the parking ban that's going to be coming up anyway. So I think just for now, since we weren't getting a lot of traction with it, I'm going to request that this be removed without prejudice as well.
Second. Okay. A motion and a second to remove without prejudice the on-street private residence parking limitations. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
And again, we are still looking at the wage theft ordinance proposal, and that is going to be hopefully ready by our next meeting in November. And we are also meeting on the 12th of November at 5:15.
Okay, that concludes?
That concludes.
Okay, 11:12. Property, Councilor Kwasinski.
We had a couple of important issues be presented by the mayor. One was an easement request, various reciprocal easements for 1 Ferry Street to help that project move forward. I'd like to ask Planner Bagg to come forward with the maps and give us a brief explanation of those easements. Again, I keep referring to brief, so they're very complicated, and there are multiple easements, but the gist of it is that it helps to move forward and benefit both this municipality and the developer in the process of removing the ugly site at Ferry Street and giving us a beautiful area.
We want to turn off some lights so we can see.
I can grab them. This takes a while, right, Jeff?
It's going to take a couple minutes, if you'll indulge.
Good enough.
The one over the screen would be the best one. First switch.
I think it is the first switch. I think
That's good.
Easthampton Media does not like this setting, but thank you. I'm Jeff Bagg, I'm the city planner. I think Councilor Kwasinski gave a good, very brief overview of this. It does take a couple minutes to just kind of unpack this a little bit, but it's with great excitement that actually is it okay that I'm in the dark? Feels funny, but it's with great excitement that we're at this stage of this project, and this is a really important step for the City Council to, as Councilor Kwasinski said, make sure that we are moving as fast as we can to allow the private development to move forward, as well as our implementation of the Mass Works grant. I have a laser pointer tonight. So the map, what this really consists of are a set of easements that we're trying to keep packaged together, a few of which are on city property, which allow the private development to add features to the city properties. And then the flip side of that is that on the private parcel, we are using Mass Works funds for infrastructure purposes, so that requires an easement and authorization to do that. This is not unlike what we did behind the Pleasant Street Mills a couple of years ago to facilitate that process. It's really just an exchange of easements. They're kind of dubbed informally as reciprocal, but what we're doing is we're giving certain rights to the property owner at 1 Ferry Street, and the property owner at 1 Ferry Street is giving us certain rights. There is a memo with the City Council dated October 10th, and what the Planning Department is doing is trying to facilitate the process whereby the City Council is being asked to authorize the mayor to execute these easements. We have the draft language has been submitted, and there is a step after this where the final language will be negotiated between the mayor and the property owner. But what we have before you is the purposes laid out and a series of the map which depicts which easements are intended to do what. So I am asking, and there is a draft motion in front of the council for the authorization to happen tonight. What I'm going to do is try to use the laser pointer to go over the series of easements. The first several are the city granting the easements to the owner of 1 Ferry Street for a variety of purposes. So this is the rail trail that runs along and past sort of generally the north side of Ferry Street. So easement area number 1 is the north side of the rail trail. And this is a temporary easement that allows the access over the rail trail and onto that side for the purpose of installing utilities and doing some maintenance and things along the lines of selective tree pruning and certain activities that might be necessary. Similarly, this is easement area number 2, and it's the portion south of the rail trail and on city, so this is all the city right-of-way. And in this area, if you've been on the bike trail, it's overgrown. There's a chain link fence in there, and there's a drop-off which kind of goes in towards the Ferry Street property. So this is easement area number 2, and it's also temporary and includes allowance for purpose of installing utilities, maintenance of vegetation, and on another plan, which I will show you, is a future bike path connection will start on the Ferry Street parcel and will travel north over this piece of property, and it's going to be Mass Works funded, but the easement is there in case necessary, but it's going to allow a switchback bike path connection there. Easement area number 3 is this area here. So right now the rail trail runs in between Lovefield Street and the Ferry Street property. It's hard to see, I understand, but there's an area here where through Mass Works, again, infrastructure related, a retaining wall will be removed. There's an existing retaining wall that is really the property line. That's going to be removed, and a new wall is going to be built about 15 feet onto the city property to provide a row of parking spaces. And so this easement area number 3 is a permanent one, which first allows for access and construction of the retaining wall in the parking area. And then what it allows for is providing parking and travel lanes for vehicles that access the parking spaces for all purposes which public parking lot and public parking spaces would be used for. So this is an area that would be ultimately available for public parking. And I will flip to a map. There's a proposed staircase down to access that from the rail trail generally. So then, easement area number 4 is immediately to the right of the bike path, in between the bike path and building 1. And this is primarily for utility services, and the city council did already approve a utility easement here. So this is a secondary easement to allow the future installation of utilities and to just complement the other one. So again, those are the easements that the city is granting to 1 Industrial Lofts. And then we move into the second set of easements where the private property owner is going to be granting the city easement rights for a variety of purposes. So then this starts with easement number 5, which corresponds with the construction of a retaining wall and parking area, and it's demarked in blue. And this is the right to pass and repass of cars over the private property and into that area. So it's pretty simple. It's an access agreement. Easement area number 6 is the far side of the property. We're calling this the east side, the eastern portion. So there's a significant amount of work that will happen here in the future, which is a series of 2 retaining walls, a bike path, and a row of parking spaces, which all will be, the parking will be publicly accessible, and then the bike path will obviously be a public amenity to traverse from Ferry Street over across the property and onto the rail trail. And again, I have some images of what this will look like. Then finally, easement area number 7 is along Ferry Street. There is a city right-of-way that covers most of the paved portion of Ferry Street. And then as you envision it today, there's sort of a dilapidated parking area in the guardrail which faces the pond, and that's actually property that belongs to 1 Industrial Loft. So it's actually a private parcel where you would definitely think it's public. So this is an important element for our ongoing Mass Works grant, because this will become parking and a multi-use path. So not to belabor it, but I think that this is the rendering of the private development. So this is the area where there will be a new retaining wall and row of parking spaces added. Down here, which I believe I have some other images here, this is the parallel parking that will be installed along Ferry Street. And then this is the future bike path connection, which runs along the east side. And then this front row of parking will be this area is funded publicly, so this will be public parking and with the public rail trail. Before I move forward, I think I have a couple images that are brand new, and they're the pretty pictures that accompany some of this. So before I do that, are there questions that I could tackle before I move forward any further?
I just would like to bring up some of the issues that were brought up at the meeting. Basically, there was concern that the bike path might be shut down or closed. That was one of the questions. And my sense was that it would be very minimal if there was a closing, that you'd have advance notice. There would be postings or a rerouting of the path at a certain point. And that was a minimal impact. It wasn't like this is going to take 6 months of shutting down the path, but it might be, our sense was a day or 2 or a week of time that work needed to be done. Is that correct in your?
Yes, and I believe there was language in here. The intent is to not close the bike path,
right?
Except for where it's absolutely necessary, and any of the work that might occur, especially along the sweeping portion that goes along the top of the property, that would be very temporary in nature. There will be some activity once this connector is constructed. So those are, if you can put those into one bucket, those are going to be temporary situations that will be resolved fairly quickly. There are other arrangements being made for the crossing at Ferry Street. And that is something that we have directly under our control with the contractor, that the proposal is the construction of a temporary gravel path to allow people to continue to traverse through while the new crossing is constructed. And so that is built into the contractor specs for the Ferry Street Road project. Were there other issues that...
Basically, I wanted to also point out that there was some urgency to moving this forward because of the time frame of the construction, the building period. I will also mention at this point for all the councilors and the public, we did ask the question of the city solicitor at the meeting of the property committee. Does the council have the right to ask the mayor to return the documents to us for final approval? And he confirmed that that was the case, just so we all are aware of that there is a council authority to ask the mayor to return documents that she negotiates. I do not recommend that at this time. The committee felt that it was unnecessary. We were hopeful that this could be conducted without a return of the documents to us. So, just a note for the committee. And we did pass this 3-0.
Additional questions from what he's covered so far for Planner Bag? No? Okay, thank you.
Great. So, and at this point, I just want to, I want to give true acknowledgments to the owner of the property who's present. The development of the 1 Ferry Street parcel is so critical and is moving along at a very rapid pace. And so there's so much happening, and it all has started in the past the past 2 months. And for the private development portion, what you see happening now is this is what is called Building 1, and this building is being renovated for commercial office tenants, and the expectation is that building will be occupiable by perhaps next summer, generally speaking. And what preceded that was the demolition of the T-shaped building here, which was always slated for demolition. And so within even the canal runs through the property here. So everything west of the canal is a large phase 1, but even within a phase 1, the development of this parcel has multiple other phases. So renovating the building and constructing this parking area is first and foremost on the list, and then the speed. I've said this a couple times, and I think it's really worth just repeating once, is that municipalities don't have a lot of tools at our disposal to help these projects along, but the one thing that we can do is act as fast as possible. So I really give the City Council a lot of credit for doing the first reading, going to subcommittee, and coming back. I mean, it's been predictable, and I think that's helpful to move these processes through. The easement the easement necessary for construction of this wall will be executed, and then it'll allow that construction to proceed. So then moving over to the public road, these are really fresh images that most people haven't seen yet, but this is a visual depiction of the roundabout. And I think by next week we should be able to put these out in a more public fashion, but I did just get them, so I want to talk about them. Right now, if you didn't notice, the contractor hired by the city has been out in full force. They installed the erosion control features in the past couple days. They're out marking utilities. The first phase for the public road project is utility work. So at this point, we don't expect the road total reconstruction to start until the spring. But there will be an immense amount of activity to just address the utilities and have things happening. So there are construction signs posted. We're working through the mayor's office and the city's Facebook page to start letting people know that if you can, you might want to avoid this area because there's going to be a lot of activity until it really snows. Will be the first time it slows down. But overall, this is the roundabout. All the utility work is happening within the right-of-way. Some of the key features are crosswalks, new crossings on Pleasant Street and on Love Field. It was always contemplated in the Mass Works that there is additional parking created on Love Field, and a new pedestrian crossing on the east side, I guess, with a relocated bus stop over here. Then you will be able to traverse the city property with a staircase to access the bike path, or use the sidewalk to then have a new entrance to the bike path. I intend to appear again before the Rail Trail Committee to talk through the crossing. This is a huge upgrade to the rail trail crossing on Ferry Street, and it includes what the fancy word is a chicane on both sides, which is a relatively quick change in direction, and that is Mass DOT policy for upgraded intersections to make people aware that there's something coming. Right now it's just kind of a straight shot, and if you're not paying attention, you don't really know you're crossing a pretty big intersection. And then some removal of pavement, and then an actual crosswalk over the entrance to Millside Park, which right now is also a bit treacherous. So then going down Ferry Street, we're on the left side, you will enter a 10-foot wide multi-use path, which will be pavement, and it's really intended to activate the pond. This is part of the vision since 2002 for this area, and it's really being fulfilled by the Mass Works grant. In the center is a raised crosswalk. So we don't have any, actually we don't really have any raised crosswalks yet, so this will be the first one installed. These are common Mass DOT spec crosswalks, much like the ones installed on Cons and Pleasant Street in Northampton. And then further down at the end, where the canal goes under the road, will be a secondary crosswalk, and this one will have the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, which we have our city's first installed in country. So the intent here is that as you're coming off of Ferry Street, this will be the first crossing that you'll see, and it'll be activated with the blinking flashing lights. And then the center will be, by then you'll be in a more concentrated area, and this will be a raised crosswalk. So this is a really important feature of the project that complements the redevelopment on One Ferry Street, and really will activate the area. And then so no one has seen this next one, which is really fantastic. I'm super excited to show it, which is a rendering of what the this will become sort of a promenade, very much in line with what we have around Nashawanek Pond. The surface will be pavement, blacktop, but it'll be 10 feet wide as a multi-use path. Right now, the specification is the same railing as Nashawanek Pond, and the lighting fixtures are the same fixtures that will carry over from behind the mills and carry that same pattern of lighting over. And then this is, the depiction of the crossing area over to the One Ferry Street property and the multi-use path. So this is the view from Ferry Street looking towards Pleasant Street. And I believe we have another rendering coming, but I got this one yesterday, so I was really eager to show it. Again, this was all in line with the vision for the area, and we will be really needing to be giving City Council updates as the construction changes from utility installation to the full reconstruction of the roads, which we're expecting to be in the spring. So, the authorization to the mayor to execute the easements is really important, because as soon as we're done with the utilities, we're going to start with the road work and the projects that cross over the property lines.
Good work. Just a quick question. The rendering looks great. It's great to have that vision. I don't see any benches. I want to be sure that there's an opportunity where the benches at the pond in the center of town is just gorgeous. It gives folks an opportunity to sit, maybe chat, maybe some gathering places. I hope we have funds in the project for that, and if we don't, I'd be willing to get a committee together to see that we had some benches.
We do. If you notice, building 1 in this photograph, and the crosswalk is generally adjacent to or perpendicular to building 1. Beyond this, where the tree is rendered, the section between Millside Park and this crosswalk will have benches and amenities. The latter section. So the latter section is too narrow. So this is building 1. This is the crosswalk and the rendering, and everything to the left. This is where there are, in the other drawings, there are street trees and benches on this section. This other section, it was too constrained to, so you can see the small red strip. So it will have benches between Millside Park and the crosswalk, and those are spec'd out and part of the project.
Additional questions for the planner? Councilor Gomez?
Thank you, Mr. President. You didn't show whether, basically you were talking about 130th Street, basically that's it, and the sidewalks and the crosswalks in that area. But I just want to include a little bit more. I want to ask if the city is going to do something with the intersection of Payson and 30th Street and Emerald Place and 30th Street, because the traffic is going to be increased there. And now the traffic to turn left there is kind of crazy. I cannot imagine with new buildings and with new businesses there and housing. I think the traffic is going to be more and more dangerous there. Is the city going to do something there?
Yes, there are discussions about how to approach the upgrade of the Parsons Street, Ferry Street intersection. So that's apropos of your discussion earlier about another key intersection. That is one of the other really important intersections. We have a really thorough complete streets prioritization plan, and the intersection at Parsons and Ferry, and so not only the line of sight but the pedestrian crossings was identified, and that's really important. This project, between the roundabout and getting people off the road and onto this multi-use path, I think it accomplishes about 8 complete streets projects. So the discussions that we've had in a preliminary way are to look at the upgrade of Parsons Ferry with complete streets. Mm-hmm. So the challenge that we're trying to unlock is complete streets generally doesn't fund design. So myself, the mayor, and the city engineer are trying to figure out a funding source to come up with a design for that intersection. And then as we wrap up the Complete Streets project on Cottage Street, that would be potentially one of the next projects we could move forward and get the grant funding. And the timing could really work out that this project finishes possibly by the end of next fall or the following spring. And if everything came together, then we could be doing construction of the Parsons Ferry intersection with Complete Streets around that same time. So it's definitely something that has been talked about, and it's really the big picture would be the proposal to the state is that we've used MassWorks funding here, plus we're still going to be talking about DIF, the district improvement financing here, as tools, and then using Complete Streets funding on this other intersection and connect to 2 big projects with 2 different state funding sources. So that's the overall sort of thought process with that.
Thank you.
Okay. Additional questions concerning the project so far? No? Okay. Does that conclude your presentation, Jeff?
It does.
Okay.
Can I just add?
Oh, sure.
Just around. Just to add on to what Jeff was talking about with the different monies for the Emerald and Emerald Place and Parsons Street's intersections, we have done a really great job working with the state and our developer around getting as much money out of the state as we possibly can and deserve. And we have a strong indication that their interest in the project and seeing it moved along so quickly has encouraged them to look at it as a good place to put further money. To that end, mid-December,
Secretary Keneally will come out to do a formal presentation around the original MassWorks grant for this project after the Lieutenant Governor visited and was blown away by Building 1 and the work Mr. Michon had done. I would just put a plug in right now. I think it's going to be around December 17th. We're trying to just lock down that date, if any, all of you interested parties, to talk about the safety, and not just at this project, but there's always, you got the air, you can, add in other stuff. But it would be really important to show community excitement and support, especially with this council who has really gone above and beyond and worked with crazy timelines to get this started. And just walking by the project now, it's just amazing. You really see the potential and the future of nothing else, the site, and really Easthampton. So I'd love to have you all there at the event. As soon as that date is locked down, we will get it out to you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Gomez.
So do we close this?
Public?
It's
Not a public, so I'd like to move to authorize the mayor of the city to further negotiate and enter into all agreements and execute any and all instruments relative to the grant or receipt of certain easement and other property rights as detailed in the draft easement agreement entitled Agreement and Perpetual Grant of Easements, and plan of land entitled Proposed Easements prepared by R. LeVay Associates dated October 3, 2019, is provided to the City Council on October 16, 2019, and attached hereto and incorporated herein, which agreement and perpetual grant of easements is necessary for the redevelopment of 1 Ferry Street and certain public infrastructure.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to approve the just previously read 1 Ferry Street easements. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
We have planner bag again for a brief presentation. We are fortunate to have an owner of land who has tentatively discussed with the city the possibility of establishing, the city purchasing the land, and in order to do so, the city has to do certain due diligence and would like to enter into an option to purchase agreement at 109 Everett Street. And I would like to call on Planner Bagg at this point to discuss that and show us the plan.
Thank you. With this one, there's less of a plan and more of a sort of incremental approach, a couple steps that we're hoping to take. I appreciated your introduction. I think that was a good introduction of this. There is a memo I want to note for the record that was submitted, also dated October 10th. And similarly, what the planning department is trying to do is to facilitate a process where the city can enter into an option to purchase agreement to acquire a certain property at 109 Everett Street. The primary purpose of the potential acquisition would be for housing development, particularly the possibility of a mix of market rate and affordable housing. Under the mayor's directive, the planning department and others are trying to take a multi-pronged approach to housing. So one of the other things that I think Councilor Riss noted was some funding for a housing, a couple different housing studies. So we are trying to pursue data and information that would help inform next steps to continue housing development. So it's like a market study and the update of our housing production plan. So we believe anecdotally that the data shows that we need more housing of all types, and with a specific emphasis on more affordable housing. We have a housing production plan that will expire in a year, and it tells us that we needed to be producing approximately 35 new affordable housing units every year to keep pace with the demand and to try to achieve the state's sort of goals of 10% affordable. We had a few good years with 15 Cottage and Parsons Village, but after those, it's been very small, increases in affordable units. And so the second approach is much more proactive in nature. The brief history is that the property owner came willingly to the planning department to talk about the potential for this property, pretty quickly said that it looks like it could support housing. Would there ever be a conversation of the city trying to acquire it? The property owner was very willing. So Mr. Wallach, we had some discussions about what that would mean. And as I stated earlier, I think one of the municipality's biggest problem is that we cannot move fast. And trying to compete with the real estate market to acquire a piece of property as it's listed is just not feasible. We just simply can't move that fast. So the model that we are trying to look at is similar to a couple successful acquisitions for open space, which is to negotiate some kind of agreement with the property owner for time. And that is one of the most essential things that we need to try to explore this in an incremental and sort of conservative approach. So the concept in totality is that we believe that there's a series of due diligence that would be done by us or by someone else potentially purchasing the property. And those are things like an appraisal, the delineation of wetland resource areas, and then as you develop a property, there's soil testing, so understand what's there, how would it support drainage or the construction of pavement and housing and units and all those things. And then finally, it's sort of a feasibility study to see what would be sort of the maximum build out that a property could support. So, and also things like a survey. So those are not things that happen for free. So the proposal is in this agreement that the city would pursue common due diligence steps in the effort to work towards a potential acquisition. And if for some reason the city determined that we could not or would choose not to acquire the property, then we would give those due diligence items to the property owner at whatever interval we're at. And I remain pretty optimistic about the likelihood that something could happen on the site, but I think we won't know if we don't try. So I think the important takeaway is that over the years, the city has used community development block grant funds granted by the state and federal government. And over a technical process, which I don't quite understand, the city has ended up with a relatively small amount of one-time funds that are available at the planning department's discretion, and they have not been used in some time. And so, to pay for the due diligence, we would be using this block grant program, non-program income. And we think it's a pretty modest way to explore the possibility of looking at developing the site as housing. And then I think we talked about this in the property subcommittee. This is not authorization to acquire the property. We would certainly be back before council if there was any decision to acquire it. The idea is that within 1 year, we would be making a step to acquire it. So we would want to have some of these key due diligence steps done by generally the spring of next year, and be making a decision whether and how we would take a next step to acquire at the market value of the property. So I'm sure I've covered enough that there's questions, but the property owner is here. The property owner has signed and executed their end of this option agreement. So the goal is to get your approval to allow the mayor to execute the agreement as early as tomorrow. And one of the first things that will be done is the wetland delineation before the ground freezes. So this is a project that we're trying to move as aggressively as we can as a city.
Questions for the city planner? I have one. I mean, maybe too far down the road, but the concept of the housing was intriguing. Is the idea the city would build the housing, the city would then be able to sell to a developer the housing at a rate that would be attractive for affordable housing? Maybe it sounds like the mayor got it for that.
There's two people, the mayor and the chair of the city's Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership can probably try to tackle that. It is something that has not yet been determined, but I think it's a fair question. You want to speak to?
Yeah, just well, I would ask Jana Tatro, who has led affordable housing initiatives in our city, but across the region, just to talk about this structure of the deal, but also what that housing might be depending over the next year. And then I'll add some comments, but I just want to.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Jana Tatro from the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership. I mean, this is a very exciting opportunity. I think, you know, we, as a city, we've been, for the 13 years that I've lived here, very proactive on affordable housing, which I think is something we should be really proud of. And we know that affordable housing, and arguably all housing, is becoming more and more important to the city as we become more expensive and more attractive for folks to move to. So this is coming at a really exciting time. We also know from our 2014 housing production plan that these sort of infill, smaller parcels throughout the city are really what we should be looking at for affordable housing development. We don't have, with the exception of 1 Ferry Street, we don't have huge pieces of land where huge projects are going to go on. So this sort of fits right into what the housing production plan was already telling us. I think to your question, the model that we've sort of talked about is that the city would put out a request for proposals at the end of the due diligence process to a developer to build, you know, perhaps a mixed income project, perhaps an affordable housing project, and then we would convey the property. We could do two things. We could keep the land and sort of lease it to the developer, or we could convey the property to an affordable housing or a housing developer. My preference is affordable housing developer, but any, you know, a developer that would build a property and I think what's really exciting about us being proactive and doing this year of due diligence is that the city ends up with a project that we really want, right? It gives us a chance to really think about what do we need, what's going to look great in that neighborhood, what do the neighbors want, and so that we get something that we're really proud of. And I think that we've already done a really great job of doing that with 15 Cottage and Parsons Village and 1 Ferry, you know, that we're getting projects that we're really proud of. So I think this just gives us another opportunity to do that.
Did I cover everything?
Okay.
Additional question?
Yeah, so I just a little bit of background on this and some context of how we go forward. So, one, I'm in my office and Jeff comes in. That happens a lot. It's always interesting. It's not always good. And he talks about affordable housing, and he says, I've been approached by a property owner on Everett Street about maybe what the city could do with this property. Mr. Walk, right here in the office. As we all know, open land in Easthampton, far and few between. And even if there's something on it, even something that would be torn down, the prices are soaring. And it is very hard for us to get a wedge in to stop that. But also, we are talking about a resident of Easthampton who has a very nice piece of property, who's given us a year where the, I'm sure, well-deserved equity and profit, it would be, Councilor Kwasinski, that piece of property would be sold on the open market in a very short time. Yet this gentleman came to Jeff and kind of was just shooting from the hip and say, hey, I've been thinking about this. That said, to have this year and such a creative way for our city to investigate a piece of land, so if we get to that point of what the project is, and to dovetail after on what Jana said, what the community wants to see, we have a piece of land that we know pretty sure is going to work. That we are not going to say, this is what we want to see here, and we're going to see what the wetlands are. or whatnot. And it also provides valuable, helpful, and rightfully so, information, common information that the property owner now would want and need, and it gives value. But you talk about why Easthampton is what Easthampton is. You're talking about a resident, stepping forward, no different than the Campbell and Savoy family stepping forward and allowing us to see, not necessarily a gift automatically, but allowing the city to really explore how this fits into master plan and our budget. It's super unique, and the last is we've talked a lot over the campaign season and before, as I come before you with these projects, about affordability in Easthampton. And to have an opportunity and not just have to say yes to affordable housing developer, but to say this is what we're looking for and crafting it, and we can tell them that we know where the wetlands are, and conservation taking a look at that is pretty extraordinary. It's really extraordinary. So I would just commend Planner Bag, which I think I will always call Jeff Planner Bag, I love that, for his openness, and the property owner for having conversations, and Jana to kind of come together. It's just a great agreement. I'm just so impressed. Thank you.
Councilor Lynch.
It's for Jeff. Can you just outline the property on that map, like where the property border is? Because
I will try to do it in two places.
One's fine.
Can you hold it up a little bit?
Yeah, I guess the screen is not really worth anything at this point. The map shows 109 Everett Street. So St. Bridget's Cemetery is on the map left. Mm-hmm. And forgive me because I cannot commit this to memory, but the housing development across the street.
Yeah, I know exactly where it is. I'm just looking.
Sullivan Housing is across the street, and there's currently one single-family house on this lot. Okay. It extends from Everett Street all the way to Lower Mill Pond. Oh, wow. And the size of the property in total is 7.24 acres, so 7 acres, of which the preliminary look shows that the anticipation is that about 5 acres would be developable, which is significant. And I do want to say, for the purposes of transparency, the memo captures it that the goal is about 30 to 40 units. To make a project happen at this scale, Valley CDC has given us some information that says, at 30 units is when a housing developer would be able to access affordable housing tax credits and other funding sources. And so I just want to have that on the record, that's the objective, the target. And the other thing that I did want to clarify for the purposes of the property owner is that this agreement, once executed, will give us a year, but that year is to acquire. So I will be working diligently to get the wetlands delineated before the winter, and that'll allow us to simply do the appraisal. And then, once we have the wetlands delineated, then we could potentially have the surveyors involved. And so by spring or early summer, we need to be deciding what we're going to do. And then, so that's when whatever the funding source, whether it's CPA or state or federal grants to acquire the property, we would be coming back for the acquisition, ideally before November 2020. So I just want to say that the agreement is to acquire, with the due diligence happening at the beginning. Great.
Additional questions?
So this is what the public's seeing right now?
Thank you, Vanna.
I think Councilor Lynch still had a question.
Just wanted to finish up another little note. So the stuff to go through all the steps that we're going through is actually going to be funded from your department. So It's really no cost to the city. This is the one-time things that you have from the open block grants. And at this point, there's nothing, and then it's going to come back to the council for final approval on that, right? So really, we're just approving your department to go through the steps the right way. And
yep. The technical thing is that because this is the early stages of a land acquisition, and so the city attorney, has given the advice that to enter into this agreement for land acquisition requires your authorization of the mayor to execute the agreement. And so that's why we're here. I think the expenditure of funds is something that the planning department can do. I've really, we've thought through this as much as we can. It's incremental and modest, so I personally, as the department head, have no issue with using the funds in this way to hopefully end with a product in a couple of years that would be new housing. So,
thank you. I think it's great. Thank you.
Okay. Additional questions?
I just want to say I think this is awesome. I think I really commend the property owner for coming forward with this, and it's not every day we can get something like this. So I was very excited when this came through committee.
Yeah.
And it was approved 3-0 by the property committee. Just wanted to mention quickly about the option fee, which is typical in an option agreement where the prospective purchaser offers a fee to the owner for the time period of whatever the period is, 6 months, a year. In this case, it's a year. And again, the fee here is the work that is going to be done at the expense of the city and potentially benefit the city. Or if it turns out that it won't benefit the city, it will benefit the owner. So that is one part that we had questions about, and there is no dollar amount specifically for the fee.
Awesome. Thank you. Additional questions, comments? Okay. No,
thank you. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Jeff. Good job. Just in case we have dog park questions, you're not going away, right? I move to authorize the mayor of the city to enter into an option to purchase certain real property located at 109 Everett Street, Easthampton, Massachusetts, with Jeffrey J. Wallach and Patricia A. Goslin, pursuant to the terms and conditions of a document entitled Option to Purchase Agreement as provided to the City Council on October 16, 2019, attached here to and incorporated herein.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to approve the purchase of 109 Everett Street housing agreement. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
We did have an update meeting with the designer of Berkshire Design Group, Jeff Squires, where he had presented multiple options of city property that could potentially be used for a dog park. The short story is that there were 9 sites he evaluated, one at Lincoln Street, 155 Oliver Street, another site on Oliver Street across from the old landfill, 154 Holyoke Street, 226 Park Street, Highland Avenue, a site in Nonotuck Park at the entrance to Nonotuck Park, along the street just before you enter Nonotuck Park, and also at the Little League, across from the Little League playground area as it goes down toward the pond and back toward the entrance area. There were a dozen different criteria that were presented. For example, did it have appropriate size, what's the environmental impact, vehicular and pedestrian access, the ADA accessibility was reviewed, adjacent land use compatibility, and any site infrastructure like water and electricity that's available. So those were ranked out into a scale which will be presented to the public again at November 21st at 6:30 p.m. So I mentioned that date again for all of you, November 21st at 6:30 p.m. For an opportunity to hear a full presentation of this material and have questions. It will be held here.
No, it's in Eastworks, right?
I'm sorry. No, the discussion was to go to Eastworks, that's right.
Yes.
And the room that we were going to be using at Eastworks, there was some discussion.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
I don't think it was the one by Riffs, but Jeff.
It is the one by Riffs.
It is.
It's called the West Room, and so it's the community space that's just next to Riffs.
Okay.
At 6:30.
That was the most affordable space available there?
Yes.
Yes, all right. If I miss anything here, don't escape there. If I haven't covered something, feel free to jump in. But it is important, I think, for the public to understand the questions involving the park, and I hope all the counselors can make that meeting. That concludes the update from property.
And actually, we did notice, would you like to move your ordinance to ordinance, Councilor?
Yes, we did propose a discussion of engine brakes. That's where you hear those gosh-awful sounds from generally diesel vehicles as they use their engine to brake, and it makes a horrible noise. And there are several residents who, particularly on Florence Road and elsewhere in the city, who would like to adopt ordinances that have been approved by other communities where the police can enforce a fine for violation. So I'd like to move that to ordinance.
Okay, a motion second to move to ordinance the request from Councilor Krasinski relating to engine brakes noises. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. Does that conclude, Councilor?
Yes.
Okay. Rules and Government Relations, Councilor Peak.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're going to be meeting Monday the 18th at 6 p.m. We will be further discussing the proposal to realign the roles of the council committees. We discussed this for a little bit last week, but we felt it was important that at minimum we get the committee chairs of the proposal that I had submitted had a little bit of duties and roles shifting between 3 committees and the other 3 committees being largely unchanged. So we thought it was important that the committee chairs be involved in that discussion. So we scheduled a meeting for the 18th. I anticipate that that is probably going to take up the bulk of that meeting. So, you know, the intent would be to then have another meeting sometime after the 20th to turn to Councilor Zaret's Medicare for All resolution. So I think this is going to be, I'm hoping, a pretty interesting conversation. I'd encourage as many people as possible to attend, and that concludes. Do you need to explain? Oh wait, yeah, I guess I will need a. You did last time. Oh, did we do that? Yeah, I see that. Technically, I think that did we? Yeah, I'm gonna need a. Can I get like a 90-day extension on the proposal to realign council committees?
Second. Motion a second for 90-day extension on the realigned council committees. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
Okay, and that concludes.
Okay. Charter Review Committee, I guess you're still there, Councilor Riss.
Yes, I have decided after conversations I've had with the mayor and others that this committee no longer should continue to be a part of this council. And the reason for that is because the charter itself says we only have a year to once we start the review of the charter, to provide the council with recommendations, which this committee did do in September. It is now with the city attorney, and given the nature of the city attorney's business with regard to 1 Ferry Street, easements, etc., we will not see, and that review we did had a lot of changes, and as we all know, our city attorney is very thorough and will be giving us a lot of recommendations, and therefore we won't see that. I hope we'll see it before the end of the year. It is my intent then, because the mayor must sign off on it, to meet with the mayor and look over these recommendations before I present a final document to this council. If it goes into the next term, I don't believe that's an issue, because 8 of us are going to be back, and the charter review is ongoing all the time anyway. It is our constitution. It's not something new. We will update Councilor-elect Rothschild on on whatever we recommend. The recommendations from the committee will be all that we would be dealing with, unless the city attorney decides that some of them aren't allowed by law or by the Constitution of the state. So I therefore will move that the Charter Review Committee be discontinued as a necessary special committee for the City Council.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to remove the Charter Review Committee as a council.
Just procedurally, how will this work? If there are continued questions, it will come to the council in general?
It's now in the council's purview.
Right.
So once we get it from the city attorney, I would probably well, again, the mayor must sign off on any charter changes, so we'll meet, we'll discuss them all. I'm hoping, because Councilor McCoy was on it, the committee, that we can get this done before his term ends. So I don't know how long it will take for our city attorney to get back to us, but I'm hoping before the end of the year we can have a meeting with him and the mayor and get it all done. And then I can present it to the full council.
Thank you.
It's going to take a while, though. We probably won't get it to the legislature till the middle of next year, so.
Okay, the motion and a second, I believe, to remove the committee. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Sure. I believe we've done all new business, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. See you November 20th.
Here's one, I'll sign.
Two things.